Thank you for listening to the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast with hosts Clara and Jimmy Hinton. If you're new to the podcast, please look us up on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, like, and share so that you never miss an episode. If you'd like to further support us, visit patreon.com/speakingout and check out the different rewards. You'll find exclusive rewards if you sign up as a patron of the podcast. Thank you for your support, and let's get into the show. Welcome to this week's podcast. Thank you again to our patrons who make this podcast possible. If you would like to become a patron, go to patreon.com/speakingout, and you can look at the different tiers and see what best suits you, all the way from $5 for the price of one cup of coffee a month.
I'm actually
you can help support.
$5.70 now for my favorite coffee. You know, I think we ought to have a $3 tier. And on that $3 tier, I think we should pull your hair up like this. and give,
it's funny.
Haircut by haircut.
I did an online Bible study today with a group, and they said, "Can you pull your hair up? We want to see how long that is."
Well, see,
I can't tell with it all curled.
Save it. I just think that should be our $3 tier. Guessing how long Jimmy's hair is.
We should set a cap, and if we max it out, then I'll shave it.
I just think something with your hair. It's like, as I look at that, I'm thinking we have to do something.
Hey,
yes.
I'm letting it grow. Let it grow.
Well, we'll see. How about it?
Yep.
We'll see.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm well on my way. Well, we wanted to continue the conversation from last week. Last week's episode, we were talking about some of the inadequacies with trainings as it relates to abuse. We talked about active shooter training and how probably the majority of trainings in the United States teach people to do the exact opposite of what they should actually do. Most people, when you hear active shooter, if you just ask them, and again, don't take our word for it,
Right.
just ask people. Just take a random sampling and say, all right, if an active shooter walks into, say, a school or a church building or whatever, place of employment, what should we do? What's the first step?
It'll be immediately take cover.
Yep, take cover and lock
Take
down.
cover and lock down.
Which is the
Absolutely.
exact opposite of what you're supposed to do. So anyway, I think a lot of our training as it relates to abuse is just, this information's been out there for decades, and it's kind of the common knowledge. And so people have not changed and updated the training to actually reflect what actually works.
Right.
And I think that's to our detriment. So for this episode, we wanted to talk about 5 components of what we would consider the best training as it relates to abuse. And these are just kind of the 5 core components. Not necessarily what the training is itself, but what the 5 core components are. So we're just going to jump in and we're going to list these one by one. Number 1, again, if you listened last week, you'd learn that I'm not a fan of just lecture. I think that it's highly inadequate. So there needs to be a component of lecture and demonstrations. That's just how we learn.
I believe we lose so much with just lecture. What is it? We forget 80% after so many.
Yep, it's the 80% rule after I forget how many minutes, and it's not
very
real long. Yeah, like
and
half an hour, an hour.
I know
you
it's
lose.
true in my life.
Absolutely.
I forget, and you could be very attentive at the time. But,
Sure. Yeah, you're not engaging the senses, and you're not teaching people. I talk a lot about mechanics, the mechanics of abuse. You're not teaching people. You can't teach people the mechanics of abuse if you're just
by
lecturing.
word only, no.
Even if you put them up on a screen, you're
not
still
the
not
same.
teaching
Yeah.
people the mechanics of what it actually looks like.
Right.
And so I know this gets a little bit tricky when we talk about demonstrations. You're talking about abuse. And so right away, I think people probably think, well, how in the world can you demonstrate abuse? Because you can't violate boundaries.
Right.
And you have to be extremely sensitive and extremely careful. And I kind of found a unique out-of-the-box way to do this. And again, if any of you have been on my website and looked at the video tab, I have a bunch of free videos. The training that I did with the neuroscientist, Dr. Stephen Macknick, and his wife, Susanna Martinez Conde, I think honestly was one of the best trainings I have ever been to.
Yes, absolutely.
Period. On abuse. And none of what we did had anything to do with abuse.
No, but it sure did get the point across. And
it did.
And you'll remember it. You will remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was an incredibly benign way to demonstrate how the human brain works and how we're easily manipulated and fooled, both visually and just... they talked a lot about maintaining the spotlight of attention.
Right.
And so our brain, all of us have a spotlight of attention, which is about the size of your thumbnail if you hold your arm out at arm's length.
I'm fascinated by that whole teaching
It's
because
incredible.
I had never thought about it before. And, when they explained how do magicians get away with what they do? How do they, right in front of our eyes?
That's right. And it's all deception.
Right. It's incredible.
But you have to understand how the human brain works.
Right.
And so for the magician, everything they do is it's mundane, it's boring, it's routine, it's rehearsed. And for them, they get up there, and I think they're probably... The thrill for them is not performing the magic. The thrill for them is seeing the response from the audience and seeing the wow and those aha moments. And people are completely fooled.
Right.
That's the excitement for the magician.
And let us now put that into context. That's also the excitement for the abuser.
Yeah, power, control, manipulation. That's the excitement.
Well, what did your dad say time and time again? What a thrill it was to abuse a child right in front of their parents in a room full of people.
That's right.
You and I have heard story after story of, children getting abused in front of grandparents and parents. That's the thrill for the abuser.
That's exactly right. And so until you understand how the human brain works, talking about it it's not going to get the point across. Right. For 10 years, I trained all kinds of organization. I trained churches. I trained police departments. I trained prisons. I trained military. I've trained schools. And I used to lecture till I was blue in the face. And I was like, man, these abusers are highly skilled at abusing right in front of us, right over their heads.
Right.
Then I partnered up with Doctors Macknick and Martinez Conde.
To do that,
And we were specifically training people who are in like police departments and advocacy work, advocacy centers. And I remember Chief Cox. He's like, this makes me rethink everything I do.
Everything.
From interviewing people in the interrogation room to the way I interact with people out on the street. He's like, this is causing me to rethink everything. And I think my response was, that's the point.
It is the point, right.
Seeing is believing. So we can do demonstrations that are benign and they're not abuse related to show kind of a reflection of how abusers think, kind of getting into their skin, so to speak, and to see how they see us.
How they think, how they see us,
and how the brain
how we
works.
see them.
That's right.
Right. Exactly.
Yes. And to realize that we're not as perceptive as we think we are. And I think that's
not at all.
Probably the biggest takeaway, because we all think that we're more perceptive than we really are. Case in point is people texting going down the road. I can multitask. That's an absolute falsehood. The human brain is physically, scientifically incapable of multitasking. I think
there were so many, Jimmy, demonstrations during that particular training that proved that over and over over again. No matter who you were, you got it.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, those demonstrations are vital for training. And if we strip the demonstrations away, I'm telling you, our trainings are automatically inadequate, period. End of story.
Agreed, yeah.
They're just ineffective. Okay, the second component is that we need to train both adults and kids equally, an equal
Right.
amount of time and
Yeah.
hours. We have got to train them both equally. And right now, Pennsylvania, one of the leading states, ever since the Sandusky stuff, we're paving the way. We're the pioneers. We're doing legislating mandated training for mandated reporters, on and on and on and on. How much of that training is designated for
Children.
kids?
Yeah.
None.
Nothing.
There's
Nothing.
nothing
I
that
think it's
requires
so
children to be trained.
right and is so new, so um, out of our line of thinking. It's like, where do you begin? How do you start? It would have to be at mind level to the child.
Absolutely.
Um, so you wouldn't have one size fits all.
Nope.
We never do, but yeah, it's necessary.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, and even the training for the adults, and I know I harp on this a lot, but um, the I think it's called the Act one, what is it, 146 or 136. Anyway, I
I
don't
think it's
even
30.
remember
I think
anymore.
it's
Yeah. Anyway,
136. Yeah.
the mandated training for adults in Pennsylvania, I've done it several times now. And I think it's required. You have to redo the training every 3 years, maybe. I think it ought to
I
be
can't
annually,
remember. I think it's
but
every 2 years,
but
but
it's not.
maybe
It's
more.
not a good training. It's going back to point number one. Not only is it just lecture, but it's like this mindless click through, like multiple choice. Uh,
Yeah.
You can easily take it online. And granted, I know it has to be easily accessible if you're doing a mandated training, but it's got to be better. It is not a
Right.
good training. It's not adequate, and I think it falls very, very, very short. But adults and kids, there's no reason in the world why schools aren't having assemblies about
Right.
at least introducing the idea of abuse. And
Right.
I understand the sensitivity again. Schools are trying all kinds of trainings on all kinds of crazy stuff now, and inclusivity and all this stuff, and parents are getting outraged. I understand the sensitivity behind it, but nobody threw a fit
But the
when we
truth
started
is,
doing.
1 in 4 are being abused.
Absolutely, yeah, that's
And
the
you've
reality.
got that's a reality, and the reality is that number is probably more.
Yep.
This is only that are reported that we know of. So I mean, we have a crisis.
Yeah,
Let's face it.
we do.
We train on drugs. We train on bullying.
We
We
train
tra-
on active
we
shooter.
train
Our kids
right.
just
We
had
train on
active
active
shooter
shooter.
training.
Why are we not training on keeping safe from abusers?
Yeah,
So yeah, we need to get with it here. We really do.
absolutely. And then the third component, there needs to be an annual training. It's got to be more
Oh
than
yeah.
just once every few years, or once in a blue moon. Think about fire safety, and actually today, I'm going to be cooking dinner. I have the kids for the evening because my wife, who's the director of a daycare center, has a mandated annual fire safety
Oh,
training
okay.
that, as a director, both her and her employees, all of her employees, have to have. I think it's like a 3 or 5 hour training. It's pretty extensive,
Wow.
and
Wow.
she said it's a really good training. But no questions asked. It's not. You
It's
can't opt
mandated. Yeah.
into it
Right.
or opt out of it.
Which is
It is
good. Yeah.
absolutely
You have to.
100% mandated training, or you lose your job.
That's how it should be.
Right.
Really, because we're talking life death.
For sure.
For,
Yeah.
Right.
And again, it goes back to what we talked about last week. We were talking about the active shooter training, and go into lockdown. If a shooter comes into your building, lock the doors. Well, we talked about fires. Who in their right mind, just
Right.
common sense wise,
Right.
without any training,
Right.
who in their right mind would lock themselves inside of a
In a
burning building?
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Right.
So, this training, this mandated fire training, telling people you need to get out of the building is not enough. And I agree with that. And that's why I
Right.
think it's so important that they do this annual
There
training.
are steps to follow, there are protocols to take, and there's a brain, you got to use your
Mm-hmm.
brain. And when you're in a panic situation, unless you've been trained, you go in panic mode
Mm-hmm.
and you freeze a lot of the times. You
That's
don't know
right.
what to do. What happens when a child is being molested? They freeze.
Absolutely.
Absolutely
Mm-hmm.
freeze. Why? Because they haven't been trained on what to do. They
Mm-hmm.
don't know what to do.
Right.
So, what if we gave age appropriate training
Mm-hmm.
where a child knows, hey, if this happens, then I need to scream help or do
Mm-hmm.
whatever the training says. Or
That's right.
here's the person in school that I go to immediately
Mm-hmm.
and I say that name, that this person did this to me,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing I'm not going to get into any trouble, but that's my go to person. And I
That's
won't
right.
get in any trouble if I run out of the classroom, and
Yeah.
go. What if we did that type of
Yeah, and there
training?
can't be any gray area in that.
No.
I mean, again, think about a fire. If a fire breaks out, you can't have chaos break out. You
No.
you can't have kids screaming and one
Right.
runs this direction and one runs that direction, and they don't know. There's no leader.
Order is of
Absolutely.
utmost importance, or you will lose many
Mm-hmm.
lives. Right.
And
Right.
I don't know. I've not been to one of these fire trainings, but I assume that they teach things like locking hands and staying in line, and I'm sure they teach people how fires behave
Right.
in different environments because
They
fires.
do. Yeah.
I've built thousands of fires. I heat my house with wood. Wood is my primary source of heat. I have built thousands of fires, and I'm telling you, there is no two fires are alike.
No, they aren't.
And you wouldn't
Yeah.
think that. You'd think,
Oh
well, you light
no.
a match and
No. Nope.
watch the thing go. No two fires are ever
And
alike.
fires can get out of control very quickly, just
Mm-hmm.
as an abuser can. I
That's
mean,
right.
what one little act can turn into major
Mm-hmm.
something if we don't nip it right away.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. So you have to understand all those different components and understand, the different,
I
with
think we
fires,
need to
got
treat
to
this
figure out.
with urgency, this training.
Absolutely.
Just as we do the fire safety training and the shooter training, this is every bit as urgent,
Mm-hmm.
if not more, may I say, because,
Statistically, it's far more urgent.
right,
If you look at the number of kids who die in fires, or just the number of fires that break out, um, it's a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a percent compared to
the amount of
the
children that
amount of
are being
children every
abused.
single year.
And I know we don't like to talk about this, but there are so many abuse related deaths. I mean, suicide related deaths to children of abuse that
For
have
sure.
not gotten the mental health help that they've needed. And it's frightening and it's sad. It just really is.
Yeah.
It's time we really treat this with an urgency.
Yes, and the chronic health issues,
Yes.
the self harm.
Oh,
There's
yeah.
there's so many different components.
Depression, the whole lack of self esteem, the whole lack of self worth, everything that goes with it. Self mutilation, self destruction, because of having no self worth.
Right?
It's an endless cycle.
Yeah. So that kind of spills into, I mean, what we were talking about. It spills into number 4. There need to be routine drills.
Yes.
Not only is my wife Natalie required to go to a training on fire safety every year, but they're required. I think it's every quarter. They're required to do and document these fire drills.
Fire drill.
They have
Sure.
to.
Well, yeah.
Period.
You have to practice.
They have
it.
an inspector who comes in, and she said every single time that inspector comes in to inspect the whole daycare center, one of the very first things that he or she will do is say, I want to see your fire drill records.
There you go.
It's that
I
important.
think that's great. Yeah, that is great.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah.
So, these drills, not only is the education important, but the drills are the application part of it. Actually timing people, for those. let's time people and see
Right.
how quickly we can get the kids out. Are all the kids accounted for? And when they do the drills, of course, nobody knows except you have your director and maybe one or two other people. But other than that, everybody's kept in the dark
If it's
on
real
purpose.
or not, right. And that's how it should be.
Right, because you can't plan for abuse. You can't plan
Right.
for fires. You're not like, oh, well, in 3 minutes there's going to be a fire breakout. You
No.
you can't plan for
Right.
those things.
Right.
And so you have to do these drills that are surprises. And I think same thing. Like, have somebody come in or have a teacher, have your teachers participate, and just kind of do maybe do some benign role playing where the kids are like, all right, now I need to tell whoever
Right.
the next
This can
chain
be
of command
taught
is.
from the aspect of boundaries. I love myself so much that, and I won't allow this, or this to happen.
Right.
Something along that line. And these trainings, by the way, don't you think it's time we start doing this in such a way that we make abusers really wiggle before they commit an act?
Absolutely.
Because we've got every corner covered.
Mm-hmm.
That we've made it so easy.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
open
I was just
field
going to
for
say
them.
it's
We've made it easy.
even with the training that we have now.
Oh, they
They're
probably
laughing
laugh
at it.
Yeah, laugh at it.
It's
It's a joke.
It really is. And so we definitely have to have a whole bunch of different components, like you said.
Right.
Have every corner covered. And that, again, that goes into the fifth and final component, and that's to streamline reporting. Right now, again,
Oh, that's necessary.
it's up to the adults to report what they may or may not see, what they have a reasonable
Right.
suspicion. They have to have a reasonable suspicion that abuse could have happened. And I'm telling you guys, I just looked at our annual governor's report. Every single year in Pennsylvania, we put a report out, the governor's office. I read that report every single year. I just did it last week.
I haven't read it yet.
I looked at 2021's report, and I'm telling you, first of all, the number of phone calls that go to PA Childline,
It's crazy. Yeah.
there's not that many given the population of Pennsylvania.
I
Of
think-
those, I forget how many it was. It was like I want to say somewhere around 50,000 calls for the whole year for the entire state of
That's
Pennsylvania.
next to nothing, isn't it? Yeah.
Of those, a fraction of those were actually investigated. I mean, a fraction of those
I knew you'd
were
say
investigated.
that. Yeah, I knew
Of
it.
those that
Yeah.
were investigated, a fraction of those were substantiated.
And abusers know this. They know the chances of them getting anything, even a slap on the wrist, are almost nil.
And
because
even
because
that's
of
right.
this. Yeah,
Even
they
even
know
the
it.
substantiated
They know
reports
it.
don't mean that there's any kind of a conviction.
Right.
A substantiated report just says some form of abuse happened. We may not really know what happened, but as far as tracking records, we can tell you that some form of abuse happened. The vast majority of the time, when there's a substantiated report of abuse, case of abuse, there's no criminal conviction.
No.
So you're talking, you start with the phone calls, which are not enough. And then of those, say, 50,000 phone calls, you have just a small handful. I think it's somewhere around 2,000. I have a really bad memory, so I don't remember. I'd have to have the report in front of me. Maybe we should do a whole episode on that report, just kind of
I think
analyzing
it might be good. Yeah.
But of those, say there's 2,000 that actually there's some kind of follow through, and of those 2,000, you have a couple to a few hundred that are substantiated. Out of a state of, I mean, what's our population? We have like we're one of the most populated states
You know, that's
in the
is
U.S.
frightening. It really is. And I think people hesitate to make that phone call for a number of reasons. Number one, they don't want to get involved. People don't like getting
Mm-hmm.
involved. They really don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they're afraid if they're wrong, they'll get a nice person in trouble. Number
Mm-hmm.
three, people don't really believe half the time that this really is worth a phone
Mm-hmm.
call. And number four, people know also, like the abuser knows, that phone call is probably going to get, nothing's going to get done with it.
That's right.
And so, what a shame.
Yeah.
What a shame, because there are real children out there who are suffering and who can't get help because of that.
I I want to I want to talk about something kind of controversial, just because that's what I do. But
I'm afraid. No.
well, you remember when that came out about President Trump. He made the comment. It was on like hidden camera. Somebody had a hidden camera, and he was getting off the bus, and he was talking to a friend of
I
his,
know
and he's
what
like,
you.
"Yeah,
Yeah,
grab her by the,
yeah, yep,
please."
yeah. I do remember. Yeah,
And
yes.
he kind of chalked it up, and he was like, he's like, "Yeah, I said it." He's like, "There's no denying I'm in the video." He's like, "It's locker room talk,"
Yeah.
and the advocacy community went like
Crazy.
full on
Ballistic.
ballistic over this phrase, and he was a rapist. He was grabbing women by the whats, and this just proves that, and that may or may not be true. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
But here's the avenue that I went. Here's the avenue where I went. And again, I am not defending whatsoever President Trump. I am neither pro nor con any candidate. I don't ever express my political views. He wasn't wrong. Have you ever spent 5 minutes
Oh yeah.
in a locker room?
Have
And
I
again,
ever spent
I'm not
5 minutes with 6 teenage boys of my own?
exactly right.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying
Have
it's
I
right.
ever? Yeah.
I'm not saying it's
No.
okay. I'm not saying it's moral. I'm not saying that it's not okay. It's not okay to have
Right.
locker room talk. But
But-
locker room talk happens.
Every
So,
day.
That
every
leads
single day.
that leads to my point on streamlining reporting. So bear with me. Don't get offended. Don't turn off the episode. I'm not defending
Yeah,
President Trump.
no.
I am not at all. Believe me. But here's my point. Locker room talk happens. If you've ever spent time with teenage kids talk, talk, talk. And when they suspect that their friend is sleeping with the teacher,
Oh.
guess what?
Oh.
You give them an avenue to
Oh
talk,
yeah. They talk.
they're going to talk. Why
They
are we
do.
not providing
Yeah.
avenues for
Right.
these kids to
Right.
have locker room
And you
talk,
are
so to
right.
speak,
Yeah.
and to puke this stuff out? And so we talked about this before. I don't remember if you were part of that conversation with a mutual friend of ours, Jim. He was talking about,
I don't
why don't
think
we
I
put,
was. No.
he's like, why don't we put these anonymous boxes in the hallways of every single school where kids can say, they can drop a note in there, and it can be anonymous. And I know there are all kinds of problems with that, and you'd have to think through this a lot deeper, but just on the surface, his point was well taken. They can drop a note in, and if they have a friend who they suspect is being reeled in by a school teacher, they can drop a note in that
I
box
really
and say,
think that is.
I saw a
great.
text
I
message.
really mean it.
I
Yeah.
saw a text message. I was looking over the shoulder of my friend, and she was texting with her teacher, and there were sexual jokes or whatever. Why are we not providing a way for kids to quote
got it.
unquote,
Yeah.
to use the phrase,
Right.
to have locker talk, locker room talk? We were so bent out of shape about President Trump, who I guarantee none of us will ever meet him personally in our lives. We can't affect his behavior. You and I will never
No.
affect his behavior.
Yeah. No.
Period.
Well,
But
what
we
he
can
said-
affect the behavior of millions of kids
we
in our
can.
school if we
And-
provide a way for them to share
I see
and to
what you're
report.
saying, Jimmy. We tell kids to be quiet so much that they're
Mm-hmm.
who do they tell? Who do they go to in confidence and in confidentiality when they do suspect something? We haven't given that avenue.
To my knowledge, it
We
doesn't
have not
exist.
given a guidance counselor. But how many kids are going to go knock on the door of the guidance counselor or set up an appointment and say, Mr. or Mrs. So and so, I think I saw this text. But what if we did have in order a line of defense, a line of follow up, an avenue for kids to say what they are pretty sure they saw? And kids are smart. They see
Yes, they
and
are.
they hear a lot. They see, they hear a lot.
And I'm telling you, they talk. Kids
and they,
talk.
Oh,
Kids
yeah,
talk.
they do.
But when we discourage
They
that,
do.
and that's kind of, I guess that's what got under my skin a little bit with the whole Trump thing, is that the resounding message from the advocacy community was, locker room talk it's foul, it's crude, and that just proves that if you're having locker room talk, you're an abuser. No, it's not. Like, I've been in locker rooms. Like,
yeah.
I just, the other night, 3:00 in the morning, I woke up because there was a group of teenage kids outside my window. F this, F that. And they're like just so crude.
Ride the school bus. Your kids, when
Exactly
they ride
right.
the bus.
That's how
and am
a lot
I
of kids
advocating
talk.
that's right? Absolutely not. But that's life.
But
That's life.
That's right. But
That's
instead of
life.
saying, well, no, if you have locker room talk, you're probably an abuser yourself.
No.
Instead of saying that, say, all right, kids, like it or lump it. A lot of kids are really crude.
Well,
They're in that phase of life where they're still trying to figure
we
things
live
out.
in a area where this is the norm.
Yeah,
for
so
kids.
capitalize on
say,
that, so to speak.
but-
I know that's maybe not the right terminology, but find a way to tap into that and say, all right, what are you guys talking about in the locker
I think
room?
what you're saying is don't shut them down, but open them up and find out what's at the crux of this.
Right.
And if they're willing to talk with them.
That's
Get
right.
on that level and allow them to talk.
Streamline reporting.
Because once
Let
you
them
shut
talk.
a kid up, they're not going to open
Nope.
up. They will not. If they feel they can't talk, they won't.
That's right.
Period. I know that from being a mother.
Yeah.
If I had said to you kids, every time you tried to say something or you said something slightly off color or whatever, I had shut you down, all of you kids, nobody would have ever come to me.
Right.
And thank God that you
Yeah.
felt safe enough,
Yeah.
to come talk. But kids need an avenue away. I love that idea.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I really love that.
I mean, I just had a Bible study today. There were some pretty colorful words that were flying around. And at one point, one of the people in my study said, I'm so sorry. I know this is a Bible study, but I'm just so raw right now. I was like, don't apologize. I was like, talk freely.
Well, is
talk
that
freely.
not how we're supposed to talk to God?
Sure.
Freely?
Yeah.
Come as you are. Are we not told that?
Yeah.
No.
So, but my point is, like, I'm not defending like crude talk, and especially when it's about sexual
No.
violence and things like that. Not whatsoever. But I'm telling you, whether you like it or not, this is how kids are talking in the locker room, so to speak. It's how they talk on their phones.
Kids are very aware, Jimmy. I found that out. Kids are smart. They're very aware. They're alert. They're in tune with what's happening. And when something's happening that's off target, man, they pick up on it right away.
That's right. So why
right away.
aren't we providing a way for them to report
we
that?
need to. I think there's just been that thought for so long that we don't have time, we don't have the energy, they'll abuse this. And I think some kids would. They'd put an anonymous in, did you know so and so is doing this?
Yeah, it'd have to be really well thought out.
Weeded out, right?
Absolutely.
Right. But there again, it starts back at treating this with urgency. We
Yeah.
need to stop being complacent about child abuse. It's time we start really fine-tuning our skills, because let's face it, the predators are out there and they're fine-tuning their skills.
Absolutely.
Every day.
Yeah.
They are there every day.
Yeah. But I just thought about this,
I
like
really like that. Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that would cause an abuser to at least pause and then to even be a little bit paranoid is knowing that kids have the freedom to talk freely
You
about
got it. You got it.
when you provide. If there's a school teacher
Yep.
and all of a sudden there's a box hanging on the hall that says not you as the abused, but you as the friend of somebody, if you see something going on or you hear something between student and teacher that's inappropriate, you drop it in that box. I'm telling you, kids talk.
Children that are taught to open their mouths freely, that is fear in the eyes of an abuser.
Yep.
Very much so. Yeah. It's time we put them in their corner and make them shake. I mean,
yeah, and we're not doing it.
No.
Yeah, we're
not
just
yet.
absolutely
not
not
yet,
doing it.
But I hope we're going to get there.
Yeah.
I truly
But
do.
yeah, I think those are the 5 components. A combination of lecture and demonstrations, train both adults and kids an equal amount of time, provide an annual training. Training is required once a year. Do routine drills, much like we do fire drills, active shooter drills, things like that, and streamline reporting. We've got to provide a better avenue for kids to report. And just take away any confusion that there might be. And even if it's not the anonymous boxes hanging in the hall, there's got to be a clear system where they know beyond the shadow of a doubt, this is how I get this off my chest.
Exactly, right.
And this is the person I go to. And I know something's going to be done about it.
This is a lot of work. We always say there's more work than there are workers. But the deal is take it upon ourselves to at least begin something. We have our local PTSAs. We have our school boards. We have our teachers' unions. We have our, within our churches, we have boards. We have, we have core people to go to. Start with step 1. We need to do it.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time for this episode, and that went quick.
It did.
But let us know your thoughts. Let us know if these are things that you agree with, or if there are things that you would add.
Or if in your area you're actually doing something like that.
Yeah, we'd love to
implementing 1 or 2 of these things. Let us know.
Yeah.
Let us hear some good stuff too.
Yeah, we would love to know.
Good,
if these
solid stuff that's going on.
Yeah, if they're being implemented, I've not heard of it.
And
at
we
least
need
not
to
all
hear
of these.
of it. Yeah, we need to hear.
But it's possible. But yeah, we need to know.
Sure.
If it's a success, then we need to highlight it. So, all right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in to this episode, and we'll catch you next round.
Thanks again for listening to today's episode. A special thank you to our patrons who make this podcast possible. Please help us get the word out by searching for the Speaking Out on Sex Abuse podcast in your favorite podcast app. Be sure to hit subscribe and rate the show. Please consider supporting the podcast by becoming a patron and check out the rewards our patrons receive.